So, Sheikh Atairu Machido, if you can hear me, the floor is yours. Jazakallah khair for your time. Always. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brother Sharif.
Thank you.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم صلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وذريته وسلم تسليما كثيرا ما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
That's confirmed that I can be heard clearly. Alhamdulillah. I would like to at least say congratulations to Ghana, at least for this particular administration that has demonstrated their interest to join the league of countries that have been providing the alternative service of Islamic banking and finance in their respective countries. Inshallah, very soon we will see a Ghana also joining the league of this particular country. I would like to share my
question is that. So look, well done.
Please, to urge everybody to mute themselves. Brother Geoffrey, if you are there, kindly help with the muting of those whose mic mistakenly come on. Thank you.
Better to have it that actually, so that we can all be on one stage. Now, my assignment given to me actually by Islamic Finance Research Institute of Ghana in their 36th Islamic Finance webinar is to provide an insight based on my own experience in Nigeria. How can Ghana implement non-interest banking and finance because of the interest demonstrated by the current administration? And of course, my paper outline is first just to have a little introduction, and then we'll fall into the legal and regulatory support for non-interest bank in Ghana, look at what are the legal and regulatory support do we have in place. Then we'll go and see what are the process that's supposed to be in place for this particular industry actually to thrive in this particular finance sector. The first is just to understand that the non-interest banking and finance, which is NIB options, is being seen globally as a viable alternative to conventional finance services. In South Africa, in Britain, in Hong Kong, in Germany, and many other non-Muslim countries are embarking on non-interest banking and finance or issuances of sukuk so that they can also benefit from this particular mode of financing. So Nigeria and Ghana are actually in the best position actually to see how they can tap and attract some fundings that can come into the country through this non-interest banking and finance interest. And from the inaugural speech of Mr. President, like I mentioned, it was clear that Ghana is warming up to be among the global countries that embrace non-interest banking and finance as alternative financial services for economic growth and development. However, to introduce and implement the non-interest banking and finance industry, Ghana should create strategic plans and processes. This can be learned from Nigerian experience, like I mentioned to you. At least I participated in one way or another with respect to the development of this particular industry in Nigeria. In Nigeria, the non-interest bank services and products introduced since 2008, when the Lotus Capital launched the first Sharia-compliant mutual fund called Lotus Halal Fund in March 2008. And of course, the introduction of Jaiz Bank in 2011, when license was issued by Central Bank of Nigeria to Jaiz Bank, and of course some other window like Stanbic IBTC, have been accepted and is open for all, irrespective of faith, tribes, or religion. This is demonstrated actually from when even the Lotus Capital that started in 2008, the subscribers, the unit holders that have subscribed into this particular funds. I remember vividly, we went for study tour. We went actually around to market this particular funds in the northwestern state where we believed there are a lot of interest in that. We were not able to go to other other states outside the northwestern states. But after we open and close, Anambra State, which is the Christian majority country state in Nigeria, actually subscribed much more higher than what Sokoto State actually invested in that particular thing. So, and you believe that in Anambra, it's not actually Muslims that are in Anambra that invested. So it has been accepted since actually the first instrument that was launched in 2008, that is the Lotus Halal Fund. It has also been demonstrated in Jaiz Bank when the offer was launched in 2004, 2005 to a private placement, which actually was welcomed by many. And of course, also the clients and customers of Jaiz Bank, some of them actually that Jaiz Bank have started are actually people from Enugu, from Anambra that have came and actually took facility or took financing from Jaiz Bank. So it has been accepted and is open for all, irrespective of faith, tribe, or religion. And the acceptability of non-interest bank in Nigeria made financial regulatory authorities, such as the Central Bank of Nigeria, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the National Insurance Commission, the National Pension Commission, the Nigerian Deposit Insurance Corporation, and the Federal Inland Revenue Services, all of this actually to provide legal framework within their respective subsector in order to make sure that they contribute into the entire ecosystem of this particular industry. As a result of all this regulatory framework provided by this regulatory authority, so far we witnessed success stories for establishing non-interest bank and finance. We have so far 5 standalone Islamic bank, which is Jaiz Bank, Taj Bank, Lotus, Alternative, and Summit Bank. And also we have some applications with the Central Bank of Nigeria that are trying to also have some more new licenses. We have one Islamic bank window, which is a conventional bank called SunTrust Bank that also opened a non-interest bank window within that particular conventional bank. We have Islamic Microfinance Bank, which are licensed by Central Bank of Nigeria. We have 5 Takaful insurance operators, which are licensed by the National Insurance Commission, which is Jaiz Takaful, Cornerstone Takaful, Salam Takaful, and Crown Takaful. We equally have some that are already on the way, including Al Wafa Takaful, that have just received their approval in principle, and they are trying to see how they can meet up with the final license. We have the 4 operational fund management service firm that are also provided the services such as Lotus Capital, 117 Capital, which is my entity, Trust Author, and the Marble that dedicated all their financial activities to only non-interest finance. We have 3 standalone issuing houses, 117 Financial Services Limited, Bura Capital, as well as Lotus Capital, that have dedicated all their issuing house, which is financial advisory, in order to raise funds dedicated only for Sukuk issuances. So far, we also witnessed 11 Sukuk issuances to the public, which is Osun State that raised at least 11 billion naira in 2013. Federal government of Nigeria that issued 6 Sukuk so far, that issued over 1 trillion naira so far to construct and renovate some of the roads in the 6 geopolitical zones in the country. Then we equally have family homes that is actually providing the affordable houses. They've came quite to raise 30 billion. We have Taj Bank, which is one of the Sharia compliant bank also that have issued their Mudaraba Sukuk. And we also have Lagos State that equally issued 20 billion in order to construct roads. These are all the Sukuk actually that we are proud of that so far publicly issued in Nigeria. We have 2 states and 1 corporate gearing up for Sukuk, such as Kano State and Jigawa State. They are planning to issue their Sukuk, as well as Taj Bank is trying to come for the second time to issue about maybe 20 billion. We have many private Sukuk issuances, such as Sokoto State, Gombe State, Katsina State, Brain and Hamas, Bilad, they all issued private Sukuk, meaning private Sukuk was not actually approved. It wasn't actually licensed by Securities and Exchange Commission. It was privately issued. Then we equally have 13 halal mutual funds registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission, and I listed some of them there. And we equally have one real estate investment trust scheme that is Sharia compliant by Chapel Hill, Denham. These are all the success stories, some of the success stories we can see with respect to introducing non-interest banking and finance in Nigeria from that 2008 down to where we are at the moment. Federal government of Nigeria has already defended. We've already actually defended the 7th sukuk of the federal government of Nigeria. So we are hoping that within this first quarter of 2025, federal government is going to come again and raise additional sukuk for roads construction again. So all these ones are actually successful results that we were able to get as a result of introducing Islamic banking and finance in Nigeria. If we can look at the legal and regulatory support for non-interest bank in Ghana, we can see that although Banks and Specialized Deposit-Taking Institutions Act of 2016 of Ghana, Section 18, subsection 1R, that is permissible activities, it provides legal recognition to non-interest banking services, but regulatory framework and guidelines are needed for Bank of Ghana and other regulatory agencies actually to manage and to regulate their subsectors. So as a result of that, even though legally the Act has provided the recognition, but there is need for regulatory framework of how the operations of this non-interest banking and finance is going to be done. This is actually to avoid an experience that was had with respect to Nigeria when both your banking and other financial act that has actually also recognized the profit sharing bank to be registered. And once upon a time, Habib Bank actually applied to Central Bank of Nigeria and they got the license and they started the operations. Unfortunately, there wasn't actually regulatory framework. How are they going to ring fence the deposit they are going to collect if they collect the non-interest deposit, because it shouldn't be actually commingled with the conventional interest-based deposit. So as a result of this, and what are the structure or the corporate governance structures that's supposed to be provided in order to make sure that the compliance of non-interest banking is met up clearly. Unfortunately, lack of this regulatory framework, the bank was not actually to continue, and therefore that particular window was closed without much time. So if we can, Ghana can learn from Nigerian experience of changing its financial regulations and creating new guidelines to accommodate non-interest finance model, as there are many similarities between Nigerian and Ghana. Some of the similarities is we have socio-cultural and religious setting. Yes, in a house, you can see that there may be some Christian and Muslim in the same family, or in some region, you can see the population of some certain religious belief are more concentrated in one region with another. This is all the setting of Nigerian, similar to what we have in Ghana. Likewise, our economic activities are similar, our political structures are similar, and also regulatory structures are similar. Bank of Ghana is similar to Central Bank of Nigeria. Nigerian Securities and Exchange Commission is similar to Ghana Securities and Exchange Commission. And all other Sharia compliant, all other actually finance regulators are similar to what we equally have in Ghana. So regulatory structures are also similar. Nigeria and Ghana are all from Commonwealth, so all their law of Commonwealth as well as the trust are embedded into our activities. Then generally their affiliation of ECOWAS is equally there. So you can see that whatever Nigerian can do in terms of their financial structure, Ghana can equally adopt the same and also accommodate whatever the differences they may have. If we can look at the rules of the regulators in the introduction of development of non-interest banking and finance in Ghana, you can see that creating the enabling environment is very needed, is very important, because there is need for fair playing ground for all the conventional as well as the non-interest banking to actually thrive. Formulation of guidelines so that everybody will know what are the parameter fence that he cannot actually cross when he is operating his own mode of financing. Institutionalizing a Sharia governance structure or framework, because there is need actually to make sure that the Sharia structure is institutionalized. For instance, banks are expected to provide a unit that is going to make sure that whatever that bank is going to be done, this particular department or unit is going to be contacted to make sure that the product they are going to send to the public is Sharia compliant. After this particular unit, the unit is supposed to also subject it to the external Sharia advisors that are also advising the bank itself. After this particular Sharia advisors, then they should extend it to the Central Bank of Nigeria, who will also review it and subject it to their central Sharia body called Financial Regulations Advisory Council of Experts that will also review and make sure that they give the note and the certification that the product is Sharia compliant before actually it is launched to the public. So to institutionalize this Sharia governance framework is actually part of the rules of the regulators such as the Bank of Ghana. Developing capacity for effective supervision of the newly created industry is equally another way, because there is need for this particular regulatory framework, regulatory bodies to actually develop capacity internally, as well as see how they can support externally to develop and create and develop actually the capacity, as well as create awareness. Introducing liquidity management instrument for the growth and profitability of the industry is equally a role that is expected for the Bank of Ghana, for instance, to do. Because if you give, for instance, the conventional bank certain amount of money and you give the same amount of money to the Sharia compliant bank, you realize that this particular conventional bank can immediately go and buy treasury bills that is interest based. But this particular Sharia compliant bank cannot actually go and buy treasury bills. They have to wait until they get financing need or somebody else approach them for financing before they use this particular money. So there is no fair level playing ground actually between the conventional and the Sharia compliant banks. And as a result of that, it is expected that the rules of the Bank of Ghana is also to provide liquidity management instrument for the growth and profitability of the industry. It is also to facilitate integration of the non-interest bank into the mainstream financial services industry by providing regulations and what are the other things that are needed for this particular actually non-interest bank to do. It is also facilitating the integration into the entire mainstream financial services industry. Then creating awareness to achieve higher level of acceptance of non-interest bank and thus higher level of financial inclusion, which actually, again, Nigeria and Ghana are all suffering of the huge percentage of financial inclusion that we have. But at least creating awareness of this non-interest banking and finance will actually reduce that particular financial inclusion, because there are many people out there that are not actually, especially in the rural area, that are not actually coming into the banking sector because of the interest issue, especially that the religious frownness of this particular interest issues. The result we can easily see when it comes to the regulatory role is first, you will see a standardization of all the activities of all the regulatory issues are going to be there. The banks are going to operate in a standardized way. Then also the control is there. The regulatory body are actually also looking at how they can control all this one by providing the licenses. If anyone actually faulted the structure or the operations, the license can be withdrawn. Enforcement is also what I mean by that. The license can be withdrawn, or penalty can be given to anybody, any of the institution or any of the banks actually that have actually crossed the line of regulations. Then, of course, safety is equally there to make sure that the investment of the depositors are actually safe in the hand of this particular new Islamic banks. Then, of course, the market confidence is there, which will go around to the standardizations. These are results that we are expecting to see as a result of regulatory guidelines by all the regulatory authorities in the finance sector. Now, for us to implement the non-interest bank in Ghana, based on my own advice, it is actually to start with special committee to be established, similar to what we have in Nigeria. However, in Nigeria, the banks have already been licensed, but realize that there is need for alternative financing, which is sukuk, and then the regulatory authorities decided to come together to form a committee called JCAF, Joint Committee on Alternative Finance, that have actually did everything possible to make sure that the Securities Commission, the National Insurance Commission, provided their regulations with respect to their own aspect, which actually immediately started to see the sukuk issuances by Osun State in 2013. This special committee in Ghana actually is to lay the foundation for establishing the non-interest banking and finance industry in Ghana. A special committee is highly recommended. The committee members may comprise the representative from the Ministry of Finance, being at least the head that can control all other subsector of the finance. Then also Ministry of Justice, because there will be a lot of regulatory adjustment that are needed to be provided. Then Bank of Ghana, that are expected to provide the regulatory framework as well as changes in their banking model so that they can accommodate the non-interest bank, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Insurance Commission, the Deposit Insurance Corporations, Tax Authority, etc., and Ifrig to act as technical assistance to this particular special committee. I mentioned Ifrig so that because at the moment Ifrig has been providing the conferences on annual basis for the past 6, 7, 8 years in Ghana, and therefore they accumulated technical knowledge and technical know-how that they can also provide assistance to this particular committee and the government in providing this particular non-interest banking industry generally. The terms of reference for this particular committee includes to aid in formulating regulatory framework or guidelines or rules, also to financial regulators, and to recommend what government projects to be funded with debut sovereign sukuk, because there is need for the federal government of Ghana actually to make sure that they issued sukuk so that they can also be financing some of their infrastructural needs through the capital market of non-interest finance in sukuk, similar to what Nigeria has done. The second one is creating a non-interest finance unit at Bank of Ghana and other regulatory authorities for oversight and regulations of non-interest banking industry. It is highly recommended to create a unit dedicated with trained staff within the Bank of Ghana, so that this particular unit is going to be the one to help in also working together with the special committee to come up with the necessary regulations. The non-interest bank will not thrive without actually non-interest capital market. And as such, the Securities and Exchange Commission of Ghana is equally to build capacity and create dedicated unit as well within the commission for regulations of sukuk and non-interest mutual funds. Therefore, even the Securities and Exchange Commission needed to actually have a unit that will also take care of all these particular non-interest banking and finance through the non-interest capital market. It's not going to stop there, because we equally have the insurance subsector in the finance. And therefore, to have a complete ecosystem of non-interest bank, the National Insurance Commission should also create a dedicated unit to regulate TACAFU, which is the non-interest insurance subsector in Ghana. So all these major regulatory authorities needs to create their unit within the department or within their respective organization to make sure that this particular unit is dedicated to actually even help the special committee and other arms in providing all the necessary supports with respect to that particular organization. The next one I can advise is creating a National Sharia Advisory Board by Bank of Ghana. Similar to what we have in Nigeria, like I mentioned to you, we already have Financial Regulations Advisory Council of Experts called FRES. This FRES actually is the central Sharia body that is advising Central Bank of Nigeria whenever there is any license to be issued to any new bank. They must make sure that they also review the proposed products of this particular non-interest bank that's needed to be licensed. Likewise, if there is any products to be launched in the public by the non-interest bank, this particular Financial Regulations Advisory Council of Experts must be the one to review these particular products, engage the bank itself, and make sure that if there are any corrections needed to be done in order to make it Sharia compliant, they will make sure that the bank make the changes before they give certification that that particular product is ready to go to the public as Sharia compliant. So as a gatekeeper for non-interest finance compliance, the Bank of Ghana should appoint competent Sharia experts to advise on any structure and instrument before Bank of Ghana approval to be given to any institutions that is seeking for license or approval for products to be launched to the public. The same National Sharia Advisory Board can review and certify any instrument or product to be approved by Securities and Exchange Commission, as well as National Insurance Commission. because Securities and Exchange Commission and National Insurance Commission may have their own Sharia board thereafter when the competence and experience is built. But at the moment, at the initial stage, it's better all the application that will go to Securities and Exchange Commission for approval of Sukuk issuances is better for the Securities and Exchange Commission to send it to the Bank of Ghana so that the Bank of Ghana can give it to the Secretariat of the National Sharia Advisory Board to review it and then give their own certification if it is Sharia compliant. Otherwise, they make changes and then report to Securities and Exchange Commission, who will also report to that particular originator who wants to issue Sukuk to make changes where necessary. The National Insurance Commission is actually to approve the Takaful operators, license of Takaful operators, as well as the product that these Takaful operators are going to be launched. And as a result of that, they don't need to actually set their own independent Sharia advisors. They can equally provide all the applications to the Bank of Ghana, at least at the earlier stage, so that the Bank of Ghana can also invite this particular National Sharia Advisory Board to review this application by NIC so that they can also certify it before actually the industry matured enough that will make SEC as well as NIC to provide their own Sharia advisors thereafter. The appointment of the members of the National Sharia Advisory Board can be diverse with local and foreign members in order to build the knowledge and expertise of the local scholars. Similar to what we have in Nigeria, we have representative in Malaysia, we have representative in Bahrain, and we have local Sharia advisors actually that are all coming together to provide whatever certification is needed. They do it online. Sometimes they come physically to do it, but most of the time they do it online. And of course, all the scope that have been issued publicly, it was subjected to this particular Financial Regulations Advisory Council of Experts of the Central Bank of Nigeria, and they gave certification before it was issued to the public. So it can also be done the same with Bank of Ghana, but they can mix this particular membership so that they can have expertise and experience of the others that are already in the industry, such as people from Malaysia, such as people from Bahrain, of course, and other from Nigeria, that we all have that competent hand at the moment. The National Sharia Advisory Board shall advise Bank of Ghana the ex-ante and ex-post aspect of business transactions or activities and operations of the non-interest financial institutions for the purpose of Sharia compliant, meaning they have to be the gatekeeper which ensure the existence of the philosophical foundation that non-interest finance aspire to implement, which is Sharia compliance, to make sure that whatever is going to go to the market, they keep that particular instrument until it is Sharia compliant. Maintain the stakeholders' confidence in the system, because if there is a Sharia arbitrage, whenever you need to issue anything, you just go to any scholar to say that he should give you the certification. It will actually create lack of confidence in the system. But if the competent hand, especially at the central level, is provided, it can maintain stakeholders' confidence in the system. So again, like I mentioned, it prevents Sharia arbitrage so that people will not just go and be looking for anybody to come and give them fatwa or Sharia pronouncement that their product is Sharia compliant without actually taking it to the appropriate authority. It also provides the risk management tool to mitigate Sharia non-compliance risk, which is, of course, reputational risk. Immediately, an issue is issued in the market, such as Sukuk, and it found that it's not Sharia compliant, it can provide a reputational risk in the country as well as in the industry. The next one is actually amendment of banking model, which is now going into the deep inside after providing these particular arms that I already mentioned. Now, the current banking model, which recognizes banks and special deposit taking institutions, is to be amended to factor in non-interest banks, such as the diagram that I mentioned below, meaning the Bank of Ghana new banking model can be, they have commercial banks by the side and they have special deposit taking institutions by the side. Now, under these special deposit taking institutions, then the non-interest banks can also be introduced in one side, while the others, that is the finance house, the savings and loans, the leasing companies, and others can also be by the side. With respect to the non-interest banks segment, we will have also two types of non-interest banks, similar to what we have in Nigeria. The non-interest bank, in line with the jurisprudence of Sharia, which is Islamic non-interest bank that are dedicated for only that particular principle and mode, in line with the jurisdictions of Sharia than any other non-interest bank if there is any model that can be introduced in future. This is actually to provide room for innovation in case some are going to come with another non-interest banking that doesn't have to be Islamic in nature, but they can provide it as long as it is actually being practiced in another jurisdictions. This is similar to what we have in Nigeria, because in 2011, the January, February, when CBN actually introduced these particular changes in the model of banking, they were asked, why should you do that? And said only non-interest bank that is Sharia compliant. And therefore, in order to accommodate concerns of some other people, they decided to say, okay, in case there is any other non-interest bank model that it can fly and it can be done, or it is being done in another jurisdiction in another country, then you can introduce it. Central Bank of Nigeria will review it. If they fit, it is okay, then they can give you license to do that. But this particular Islamic non-interest bank, it is dedicated, it has all its principles, and there are many jurisdictions that are doing it. So they have to also make sure they follow the principles that are laid down with respect to this Islamic non-interest banking model. And as a result of that, this model has to be changed also in the banking model of Ghana. Now, apart from that, there is also need to develop a regulatory framework by Bank of Ghana. Bank of Ghana must establish a comprehensive regulatory framework that ensures the soundness, the compliance, and efficiency of non-interest bank while aligning with the existing financial system and global best practice. This is to make sure that whatever is going to be provided in line with this particular non-interest banking and finance, it has its own standardized operating procedures that's supposed to be done, and that has already been clearly spelled out by the Bank of Ghana. And the framework will indicate the categories, if any, that is mean of the non-interest bank license, if it is going to be only a standalone, or it is going to be standalone, as well as conventional bank can also provide a window or a branch of the conventional bank in order to know how they can. This is actually to make sure that there is a ring fence of the conventional deposit as well as the Sharia compliant deposit are not mixed up together in a window or in a branch. So there must be specifically a framework that will indicate how they are going to be treated separately without commingling the two together. Likewise, this particular framework will provide the minimum capital requirements for this specialized bank of non-interest banking. The Sharia governance structure of non-interest bank, like I mentioned, a bank that seek for this particular non-interest bank is supposed to have a unit that is going to be the Sharia compliance unit to make sure that they continue looking at whatever the bank operation is. Apart from that, the bank should also appoint external competent Sharia body that are going to also advise them internally with respect to what they can do. And in addition to that, the national body that is in Bank of Ghana that will also provide the final say when it comes to Sharia compliance is needed for this particular Sharia governance structure of the NIB. Acceptable financing contracts, because there are different contracts, we have to make sure that this particular contract you are going to do, this is how you have to do it. There are profit sharing contracts, there are sales contracts, there are lease contracts. All these ones are actually contracts that can be provided and be listed that these are the only contracts that can be accepted in this particular mode of financing within the framework. Then appointment of technical partners, because Bank of Ghana is just starting at the moment. And operation-wise, there is no experience in the country. And as a result of that, there is need for any bank that wants to have a license to make sure that he has a technical partnership agreement with some banks outside the country that have already been doing this Islamic banking and finance in another jurisdiction. Maybe for at least an initial stage, say for 3 years. That is what Central Bank of Nigeria here in Nigeria, we do for 3 years. Now that we are building, or we built some certain competence, there is no need for that particular technical partnership, because we already have internally that particular technical partners that can be provided without going external. So being Ghana is just starting, it is better also to have it in the framework that a technical partners agreement must be filed with the other applications documents with the Bank of Ghana when licenses is going to be provided. Compliance to IOFI, which is Accounting and Auditing Organization of Islamic Financial Institutions, as well as Islamic Financial Services Board standards, should also be mentioned in this particular framework so that it can be all holistic to know that the standards provided by these two institutions must be complied by anybody or any institution that wants to have a license when it comes to this non-interest banking and finance. This is what Nigerian has also done in order to summarize whatever they intend to do. And IOFI is actually an institution, a standard setting institution that is based in Bahrain that has been providing Sharia compliant standards for Islamic finance generally and being accepted globally. IFSB is based actually in Malaysia, and they are equally having their standard being recognized in many countries that are doing Islamic banking and finance. And there is need for also Bank of Ghana or the institution or the regulatory authorities in Ghana, whenever they are providing their framework, to make sure that they also indicated that whatever issuances or whatever licenses that is going to be provided must follow the IOFI as well as IFSB standard. The Bank of Ghana is expected to provide liquidity management instrument. So far in Nigeria, the Central Bank of Nigeria has provided about 5 different liquidity management instruments in order to make sure that the non-interest banks are actually using that particular facility and liquidity management instrument to manage their short-term needs of the funding. Either they need the funding or they want to provide the financing to keep for some few days. They can do that to the Central Bank of Nigeria. So it is expected that the Bank of Ghana should also provide this liquidity management instrument. However, in that particular regulatory framework that can be provided, all the comprehensive needs of this particular industry can be provided either in one document or in a document together with some addendum that can be provided in circulars and other guidelines. We equally have to get some rules and regulations by the Securities and Exchange Commission. So develop a regulatory framework by Securities and Exchange Commission of Ghana, because the Securities and Exchange of Ghana must also establish a rules and regulations on sukuk. How will the sukuk going to be issued? When they are going to be issued? What are the contracts that are expected to be provided in issuance of sukuk? Likewise, it's the same Securities and Exchange Commission that manages the regulations of the mutual funds, which is or Sharia compliant fund in this particular mode of financing that we mean. So as a result of that, the rules shall indicate eligible contracts or eligible issuers. Who are the issuers that's supposed to do that? Of course, a brewery company cannot issue the sukuk, for instance, and some other non-Sharia compliant companies cannot issue, for instance. So eligible issuers must also be indicated in these particular rules and regulations. Acceptable underlying asset or projects must also be mentioned, that the non-interest, the prohibited elements of alcohol or piggery and some other things that are clearly spelled out as prohibited products or business transactions must be actually not accepted in this form of rules and regulations by the Securities and Exchange Commission. Likewise, appointment of Sharia Advisory Board by the issuers that are going to issue sukuk, for instance, must have external Sharia Advisory Board that will structure the sukuk for them, review all the necessary contract documents before filing with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Also, they have to indicate the compliance to IOFI and IFSB standard, like I mentioned in the Bank of Ghana's proposed implementation regulatory framework need. The application to issue sukuk can be subjected to the National Sharia Advisory Board of Bank of Ghana for Sharia review and certification, at least at the initial stage. Similar to what we have still in Nigeria, the Securities and Exchange Commission, whenever they receive any application to do with the sukuk issuances, they will actually subject that application to the Central Bank of Nigeria, who actually will invite the Sharia advisors of Central Bank of Nigeria to review it together with the professional parties that have filed this particular document with the Securities and Exchange Commission and defend it. And then if it is due and found it to be Sharia compliant, then the Central Bank of Nigeria, through the phrase, will give actually their certification to the structure, and then will mention it, will state it to the Securities and Exchange Commission, who is communicating it to the professional parties. So it can also be done through this particular earlier stage in this particular Ghana issues, for instance. Then also we have the National Insurance Commission that is also regulating the insurance in Ghana, they must also establish their own takaful guidelines, which is the non-interest insurance, because they control and regulate all the all the insurance activities. Therefore, the takaful is also under their purview for them to regulate by giving licenses and approving products that these takaful operators are going to be issuing out. So the guidelines shall indicate minimum capital requirements for takaful licenses that are needed, approved models, because there are different models being exercised, being practiced in different countries. In Nigeria, we use actually 3 models. We have the Mudaraba, we have the Wakala, and we have the hybrid. Mudaraba is actually a joint venture where the takaful operator is going to be the manager of the funds, while the fund providers, the people that are that are seeking for the insurance, will put the money together and they will become the capital provider, while the takaful operator will manage it, which is called the Mudaraba. It's a JV, it's a joint venture structure. While the second structure is an agency structure, which is Wakala, where the takaful operator is just an agency. Take our money, who actually contributed our money in the basket in order to safeguard one another between ourselves. Manage it for us. If any one of us actually get any problem, come and make sure that you settle him, and whatever the residual still belongs to us. Then the takaful agent, who is the takaful operator, has an agency fee that must be paid to him because of the services he is providing. We have these two. Then we have a hybrid of both the Mudaraba as well as Wakala in Nigeria. Therefore, with respect to the Ghana National Insurance Commission, they can decide what form of actually models are they going to use. Then also appointment of advisory board by takaful operators. Any takaful operators that wants to operate must also make sure that he has actually the board that are Sharia compliant, that are looking at all the Sharia compliant operations of the takaful operators. Therefore, the advisory board must be appointed by the takaful operators, and this advisory board must also be approved by the National Insurance Commission. Investment policy must be also mentioned in the guidelines. And it is expected that, similar to what we have in the conventional insurance, where there are reinsurance, likewise in the takaful, there are retakaful. Therefore, it is necessary for any takaful operator to also take the retakaful in order to make sure that they mitigate and manage some of the risks that may come at a go. It can also be mentioned that it will be compliance to IOFI as well as IFSB standards, similar to what I mentioned with respect to the Securities and Exchange Commission as well as Bank of Ghana regulatory framework. The application for license or product can be subjected to the National Sharia Advisory Board of Bank of Ghana for Sharia review and certification at the earlier stage of this particular industry, pending when actually it is time, when actually National Insurance Commission may decide to establish their own Sharia advisors. But before that particular Sharia advisors, they can subject all the applications to provide for the license of this particular takaful operators to go to the Bank of Ghana, so that the Bank of Ghana can give it to their Sharia advisors, and then the Sharia advisors can advise and say, yes, it's Sharia compliant, otherwise, with respect to all the products that are going to be issued by the takaful operators. We equally have the Ghana Deposit Protection Corporations, which is similar to Nigerian Deposit Insurance Corporations, because they do provide insurance to depositors of banks and deposit-taking specialized institutions in Ghana by collecting annual premium and investing such premium in different instruments that are available. However, in non-interest bank, there are insurable deposit and there are uninsurable deposit. Because there is Mudaraba investment account that they've decided to say, we hereby take all the risk. As long as if there is any risk, we will bear that particular risk. That particular one is actually uninsurable. But if the current accounts that are just given as a safekeeping to the banks actually to keep this deposit is insurable deposit that must be insured by the Ghana Deposit Protection Corporation. And as a result of that, this particular Ghana Deposit Protection Corporation is expected to provide guidelines on how to collect the non-interest bank premium on insurable deposit and invest in compliance instrument, because there must be instruments such as Sukuk that this particular deposit or premium that are going to be taken from this NIB must also be invested so that they can be earning the Sharia compliant return. We equally have the Ghana Revenue Authorities. And this Ghana Tax Authority law, there are financing contracts in non-interest finance that have 2 cells before it is being consummated. The Ghana Tax Authority has to change the mode of collecting tax from such a change in tax law. Because, for instance, in non-interest banking, there is a contract called Murabaha. And this Murabaha is a cost plus the profit markup cell, where a customer will approach a bank for a financing of an asset such as a car or a house. This particular car and a house are not readily available, but the bank must go and buy this particular car and take the legal as well as beneficial ownership of this particular asset, and before they sell it to the customer. And as a result of that, by going to the by the bank to go to the hello, Jihad. By actually this particular bank to go to the vendor and buy this particular car, they've already done one transaction. They've concluded one transaction and paid the money immediately to the vendor and take the legal ownership of the car. And then that is when they can come and sign the agreement between the bank and the customer, because the bank cannot sell what they don't have. But now they already have this particular car, so they can transfer the legal ownership of the car by signing the sales contract, which is going to be another sales, meaning there will be 2 sales contract in this. If Ghana Tax Authority look at it as a 2 sales, they are going to charge double taxation. And by charging double taxations, actually is going to be too expensive for the bank, for any actually customer to go to to such kind of banks in order to get financing. And as a result of that, is not going to be a level playing ground by the Islamic bank versus the conventional bank. So there is need for a change in tax law with respect to these particular things. There is also need, in line with the implementation of non-interest bank in Ghana, to have a membership for technical and investment support. For Ghana to get full advantage of establishing non-interest banking and finance, there is need to become a member in Islamic Development Bank. Membership in Islamic Development Bank can attract both technical support for all the regulatory authorities that are needing the technical support. They can be trained by this particular Islamic Bank of Ghana, especially the Islamic Research Training Institute, which is the training arm of the Islamic Development Bank. The Islamic Development Bank can equally invest into equity investment in the institutions, such as the Islamic banks, if they approach the Islamic Development Bank, and they need actually investment into the bank. Similar to what we have, Islamic Development Bank is a shareholder in Jaiz Bank here in Nigeria that we have. So Islamic Development Bank can equally invest in equity in any institutions in Ghana as long as they are Sharia compliant if they need to. In addition to that, the Islamic Development Bank can also finance infrastructural projects in Ghana. So at least they have double edge reward and advantage by having the membership of Islamic Development Bank as Ghana to be the member of Islamic Development Bank. There is also need to be a member of IOFI, which is Accounting and Auditing Organization for Islamic financial institutions that is based in Bahrain. They issued standards for the global Islamic finance industry, like I mentioned, and they give technical support, which is the capacity development to regulators in member countries. So by Ghana being a member of IOFI, they can be inviting IOFI, and IOFI can be coming to Accra and be another location in Ghana, so that they can also provide the technical support when it comes to capacity building of the regulators or of the entire professional members in the industry. A sister organization, which is the Islamic Financial Services Board, that is also the Islamic Financial Service Board, that is an Islamic financial international standard setting body for regulatory agencies based in Malaysia. They give technical support similar to what IOFI is providing, which is capacity development to regulators in member countries. And in order to also make sure that all the standards that will be referred in the regulatory framework of the Bank of Ghana, the Securities and Exchange Commission of Ghana, the National Insurance Commission of Ghana, in order to give reference to all these ones, you need actually to be a member of this particular organization, so that they will also be coming and be providing the capacity building to the regulatory authorities or to the operators in the industry based on the invitation of the regulatory organizations. There is also need for collaboration, which is a cross-border and international collaboration and partnership is a sustainable ingredient in non-interest finance industry in emerging markets like Ghana. So Nigerian can play an important brotherhood role in supporting Ghana, especially with the regulatory technical support from Central Bank of Nigeria, Nigerian Securities and Exchange Commission, NICOM, among others. These are all actually organizations or regulatory organizations that have already built capacity and also provided series of regulatory frameworks that they already have. Central Bank of Nigeria have a lot of guidelines with respect to many other issues in relation to this particular industry that can be tapped by the Bank of Ghana. So there is need to support his experiences. Also, there is need to support the educational institution. The non-interest banking and finance require continuous capacity building, public education and financial literacy capacity are all needed so that all these particular institutions can look at what they can do with respect to can look at what they can do in order to continue expanding their educational aspect in line with all these aspects. Universities, colleges, and non-governmental organizations like Ifrig can provide courses and conferences in non-interest banking and finance, which play an important role that needs government support and encouragement. So this is actually what can be provided in order to make sure that you continue building, because there is need for Sharia scholars to be built, because the Sharia scholar who is just a local Sharia scholar actually needs to have a financial knowledge for him to marry this particular mode of financing, to understand how the non-interest banking and finance works. And as a result of that, it is only universities and colleges and non-governmental organizations and institutions that can provide this kind of services to this particular group of scholars that may be needed to support this particular industry. Now, to wrap my presentation, I can only say that the Ghana needs not to reinvent the wheel for establishing non-interest bank and finance, but they can learn from Nigeria and they can borrow from Nigeria whatever they want to do. This is what I can say, and this is what I can advise the Bank of Ghana, the Securities and Exchange Commission of Ghana, the National Insurance Commission of Ghana, and other stakeholders in Ghana to make sure that they've looked at all this step by step, what are needed to be done in order to see how they can implement the non-interest bank in Ghana in utmost fair. The special committee that I mentioned can be given a timeline of, say, 6 months to maybe 9 months, what it is expected, because this special committee probably may also need capacity to be built. They may need to have actually some professionals that will come and tell them this is how this particular mode of industry, it works actually, for them to understand it and then develop contextually what is needed to be provided to the government as their own recommendations and what the other regulatory authorities needed to be done, in addition to the representatives that are also there in that particular special committee that I mentioned as the first. Inshallah Rabbi, this is where I stop. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Thank you so much for your patience and listening. If there is any questions, inshallah Rabbi, I'm ready to answer that. Thank you. Dr. Shuaibu and Sharif.
MashaAllah. Thank you very much. Now, Sharif, take over.
Thank you so much, Sheikh. Jazakallah khair. We are grateful for your time. So, members who want to ask a question can raise their hands, and then inshallah they will be allowed. But please be brief with your question, and then Sheikh will take note of it, and then we'll take about 3, then you answer. But before we go to the audience, I have some questions in the chat box. So maybe let me start with that one, and then we go to those asking on voice. The first question is from Alpha. It says, great submission to Jazakallah khair, Malam. All things being equal, if political will and all other factors are in place, how long will it take, do you estimate, for us to roll out Islamic banking and finance in Ghana? Months or years?
Thank you so much, Alpha. I've already mentioned it in my closing remark, saying that at least that particular committee that I mentioned can be given a timeline, say, of 6 months to build capacity, to understand what they can do, and to provide their report to the government. By doing that, then while they are doing that, there is need for the private sector to be ready to file their application for the bank to be licensed by the Bank of Ghana. So if there is any corporate organization or private sector or individuals that wants to come together to make sure that they get to the license, they should start working from today to make sure that they started the business plan and some other documents required by the Bank of Ghana. The same requirements that the Bank of Ghana may have in their conventional banking license may be the same. Is only the addition is the Sharia governance structures that must be there, how the non-interest bank is going to be provided. So if all things being equal, we have this particular special committee provided their report, the unit is being incorporated in the Bank of Ghana, in the Securities and Exchange Commission, in the insurance commissions, and then there is also need for some technical aspect to be provided. All these ones can come together in order to make sure that they work parallel together. In 6 months' time, they build capacity. Like I mentioned, unlike Nigeria, because we didn't know how this is how it's supposed to be done, but we have been doing it in piecemeal, and it took us a longer time to prepare. But Ghana can always borrow from Nigeria. Like I mentioned to you, in Nigeria, the JCAF, Joint Committee on Alternative Finance, came actually after even the regulations has been passed. Then we realized that here are the banks, but there is no sukuk to be issued. There is no insurance coverage for the products. So there is need for this particular sukuk and coverage. That is when actually the regulatory bodies decided to quickly run together and form a joint committee on alternative finance to provide reports to the Minister of Finance that this is what federal government can do to issue sukuk. And therefore, with this experience, we don't need to stay until the license is issued in Ghana before the committee is provided. We can start with the committee as well as the units to be provided within the regulatory organizations. Within 6 months, 9 months, 1 year, the license can come out depending on the interest of the private sector as well as the capacity built within and outside the regulation, inshallah Rabbi. Jazakumullah khairan for that particular question. Alpha. Now, Sherry.
MashaAllah. Thank you so much. Sure. Jazakallah khair. So I think for those who have raised their hands, I'll start with Sheikh Mohammed Isa. You can kindly unmute yourself and then speak, but kindly be brief, inshallah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. First of all, let me congratulate Dr. there, our presenter, for a very informative presentation. I was following word by word. I am calling from Tanzania. I'm an Islamic finance expert, working here with the government of Tanzania and also government of Uganda and Zambia. And my experience is just the same as Dr. said. The steps to be taken by Ghana are correctly, as he said, but I'm just adding. The formation of the special committee, he said, is national task force, which is to be formed by Minister of Finance and financial regulators. And secondly, very important, it should be done, Islamic finance mapping, country mapping. This can get technical assistance from ISDB, and we can assist in that because we got colleagues there at the Islamic Development Bank. Technical assistance on IF mapping, Islamic finance country mapping. And lastly, then, there should be Islamic finance master plan before we go into what the doctor was saying. This is very important, Islamic finance master plan, which will bring about the banking, the insurance, that's takaful, the capital markets, halal funds. You can go as far as halal tourism. So this is the steps I think can assist Ghana to articulate the Islamic, the non-interest financing in general. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. We are grateful. MashaAllah. Sheikh Atairu, do you have anything to say on that?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much, Brother Muhammad Isa. Very good, actually, contribution there. the country mapping, like you mentioned, the ISDB, Islamic Development Bank, that can also be in there, and the master plan. Now, if you look at the task force, like you mentioned, as well as the special committee that I mentioned, are actually going to come from all the regulatory authorities that are going to be sitting together, and probably will have an expert that will be guiding them with respect to what I expect to be done. It is expected that this particular special task force or special committee will come up with their report. Now, that particular report can be that master plan. What are they expecting the Bank of Ghana to do? What are they expecting the Securities and Exchange Commission to do? What are they expecting the issuance of the sukuk by the government of Ghana to do? All these ones can be in there, and they can equally provide maybe a timeline and say into 5 years down the line, this is the master plan that we expect actually to follow, unless if there are some changes here and there that can come as a form of addendum. Thank you so much once again, Brother Sheikh Muhammad Isa, for your contribution.
MashaAllah. So our next person to speak will be Mudathir Adesanya. If you could unmute yourself and speak. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everyone. And congratulations to our wonderful speaker. I mean, as always, he always delivers wonderful presentations. My name is Mudathir Adesanya from Nigeria. And I mean, the journey has been so tedious, I know, for Ifrig and also for the people of Ghana. And I believe that there's more work to be done. But one thing I would like to add, and I would like to have to Mala Termachido, is, you know, everything it's not that it's rosy for Nigeria as well. There are some mistakes Nigeria has actually made in terms of implementing non-interest finance in Nigeria. Can you please highlight some of them and give a little bit of advice to Ghana? Because it's very important. Yes, we might say that they have to learn from Nigeria. They will have to learn from other countries as well. But at the same time, they need to also learn from the mistakes Nigeria made in terms of either regulation, in terms of either implementation, or other things as well. So I would like to stop here, and I would like to thank Ifrig for actually bringing this initiative every time to the people of Ghana. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Brother Mudassir. A brother here, of course, that we always do the Islamic banking and finance together in Nigeria, Ifrig in particular. Now, of course, in this particular kind of journey, there must be some hurdles that you will stumble and fall and then stand up and continue. There are a lot of that aspect that we can see. However, because we've already reached certain stage and borrowing from Nigeria, all the mistakes that Nigeria made, they can all try to avoid them. And that is why I also mentioned to them that even the establishment of Joint Committee on Alternative Finance, which Central Bank of Nigeria chaired, and the Securities and Exchange Commission in Nigeria and the National Insurance Commission are all members. It came after even the license given by the Central Bank of Nigeria to some banks here in Nigeria. Now, actually, to avoid anything that can come, the Ghana can bring this particular task force, can bring this particular special committee to come on board in order to make sure that they avoid all other aspects. The issue of Sharia is very critical when it comes to this particular mode of financing.
Kindly mute
and therefore,
please.
the scholar
So that, Danny Mohammed. Okay, Sheikh, please proceed. Sorry.
Now, even look at the Sharia structure, Sharia governance structures, like I mentioned earlier. You can see that with respect to that Sharia governance structures, there are levels that needed to be provided, and there is need to make sure that we protect being the gatekeeper, they protect actually the Sharia arbitrage of going and getting any advice from any scholar. So that one must be spelled out. Who are going to be the Sharia advisors that are going to be advising the banks? What are the basic requirements needed for these particular people that will be accepted by Bank of Ghana, that will be accepted by Securities Commission, and that will be accepted by Insurance Commission to advise the respective organizations that are going to provide these services? There must be need for that particular guidelines to come out clearly and spelled out. We have also slowed down with respect to issuance of liquidity management instrument. The first one actually that was issued is just in Nigeria, is just to say that give me your money as the Central Bank of Nigeria. Since you are not actually collect any interest, whenever you need your money as Sharia compliant bank, I'm just going to give you back your money. But however, I'll give you a hiba, which is just a gift that as Central Bank of Nigeria will just decide how much they are going to give you. So it's not contractual. They may decide to give you back your money as it is without actually having any other aspect of money to be paid to you. But however, there are some scholars or there are advisors of some of the banks that are saying, no, this one actually is not Sharia compliant, and they are frowning at it. And therefore, Central Bank of Nigeria continue to develop some other Sharia compliant liquidity management, up to about 4 in addition to that first one they've done. So there are some mistakes here and there. There are some backlash here and there. There are some hurdles here and there with respect to where we are developing this particular industry. But alhamdulillah, we learned the mistake, and we are not actually going to allow our brothers, if they come to us, to also fall into that mistake, because we are there before. Thank you so much once again, Brother Mudassir, for that particular questions that you raised. Thank you.
MashaAllah, thank you so much. I think the next person, Arshad, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Arshad Mirza, and I'm from India, basically from the field of finance and technology, and I'm residing in Zurich currently. Thank you for giving such a wonderful session. My question is regarding, I heard about the implementation of the policies and maybe the governance structure and the conceptual form of non-interest banking. What are your thoughts on the front where it will require some technology partners or some, designing the product which would fit with the Sharia principle, as well as it will be more innovative? So what are your thoughts on those two fronts, technology and product innovations in the which could be an offering for the consumers over there?
Well, thank you so much, Brother Arshad. It's actually very important to know that when we are talking about financing now globally, you cannot actually efficiently deliver that services without going to fintech. So definitely non-interest bank and finance in Ghana must also collaborate and see how they can do the fintech issue in addition, embedded into the Islamic bank and finance that they are going to do. Naturally, the Islamic bank is innovative in nature because of the different contracts that they do have, which are sales contract, the lease contract, the partnership contract, the agency contract. In these contracts, there are need for innovation to be provided. And as a result of that, any product that will go to the public, that will go to the customer, to the consumers, need to be innovated and be clear for them how they are going to benefit from it. So innovations as well as fintech is very, very critical, and is very, very important in the success of non-interest bank in Ghana and in everywhere. In Nigeria, of course, we equally have that particular way of fintech that are being embedded. Recently, of course, the Brother Mutassil that has just asked questions actually held a conference in Kano, Islamic finance. And of course, in that conference, the issue of fintech was clearly also mentioned and was also trashed there. It is very important for Bank of Ghana, for the industry generally, to actually see how they can go together with fintech and innovation in Islamic banking and finance. Once again, Arshad Mirza, thank you so much for that contribution.
Thank you. And just a small note, maybe I would stay connected with you where I can maybe provide some inputs on the same, because I'm equally involved in the fintech. I have my own fintech company, so I might be useful in that context. I will connect with you offline. Thank you.
No problem, Arshad. You can try and connect with especially the organizers, the Ifrig that is there organizing this one. I believe they have a way of how they can collaborate and see how they can provide to Ghana. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Jazakumullah khair. All right, so I think the next person, if Akinyele is around, you can also unmute and speak. Otherwise, Ajay Adisha too. You can also unmute and speak.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Okay, Ajay Adisha after Akinyele. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you for the opportunity, and I want to, as always, congratulate our brother Tahiru Machido for the apt presentation. And I think for Ghana, we are elated with the promise from the president to look at the Banking Act to have a review so that we can look at floating Islamic banking in Ghana. And I'm most grateful for that. I've been so happy about that. We are looking forward. We want to see it being expedited within the shortest possible time. I've been looking at how we can have that technical partnership agreement with Tabung Hajj, Bank Islam of Malaysia, since we are looking at rolling out the Malaysian model of the Hajj, which is inextricably linked to the establishment of a financial institution. And I'm so grateful for the presentation, and we are looking forward to have more of such insights. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Abdul Fattah. Thank you so much for that.
Inshallah. Thank you so much, Akinyele, for your input. Check, please, you have anything to say on that?
Well, it's just
suggestion?
to mention that in Nigeria, when we started, of course, we rely heavily in Malaysia. We actually have so many capacity building made in Malaysia. We invited so many Malaysians that came to Nigeria for capacity building. We equally have partnership with some of the organizations that he met that are also based in Malaysia. Recently, the Secretary General of the Islamic Finance Services Board in Malaysia, actually Dr. Bello Dambata, happens to be a Nigerian who went to Malaysia just to study there. And of course, after studying, he was able to get employment in IFSB, and he became the first man in IFSB as a Secretary General of the IFSB. He just actually finished his tenure, and now he's back in Nigeria. So Nigeria is rooted in Malaysia with respect to Islamic banking and finance. Now, Tabung Hajj is a Hajj fund, actually, where the Malaysians are contributing in piecemeal gradually for the future intention of participating in Hajj. And as a result of that, they are one of the major investors in Islamic banking and finance, or in Sukuk, when it comes to issuances of Sukuk in Malaysia. And of course, it's good as long as the institutions in Ghana that are planning to establish Islamic Bank are also inviting this Tabung Hajj and some institutions to also come to Ghana in order to be part of the investors or partners in this particular journey. It is a welcome idea. It is very, very good idea for people to pursue from Ghana in order to make sure that we have a lot of institutions that can compete from one another. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much, Sheikh. Aja Adisha too, you can please unmute yourself and make your submission, inshallah.
Okay, thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much for the insightful presentation. And thank you to Ifrig for organizing such a wonderful program. My question has to do with the concept of Islamic finance. As it is now, Nigeria is seen to be a role model to us. We are now going into it, and they have gone into it. And my worry is, I want to find out from Alaji if you can share with us some of the strategies or measures Nigeria put in place to get the non-Muslims, that's the Christians, to buy into the idea of Islamic finance. Because as it is now, Ghana, as we are all aware, is being dominated by what? Christians. Of course, we are many, but they are more than us. And we have to we have to put certain measures in place or something in place for them to buy the idea into Islamic finance. And then I remember when Alaji was presenting in his summation, I think he gave an example. I think there were two states. One state is dominated by Christian, and they even appear to be like they really bought into the idea of Islamic finance than even the Muslim state. So I want to find out if you can share with us what are some of the measures or strategies did they put in place for the Christians to buy the idea of Islamic finance or to buy into the concept of Islamic finance? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adishatu. But it's something we should understand. It's because Muslims are following the rules that it is being provided in our scriptures. And that is why it is called Islamic banking and finance. In other jurisdictions, they don't call it Islamic banking and finance. They call it participating bank or interest-free and some other nomenclatures they use. And as a result of the knowledge being shared during conferences and training, the non-Muslim actually understood that this mode of finance is not actually only for Muslims, because whatever this mode of financing is actually prohibited, if you check deeply into the other books, such as the Old Testament and New Testament, you will realize that the prohibited elements of non-interest banks are also embedded in this Old Testament and New Testament. Take it with respect to the interest, for instance. In Psalm, in Deuteronomy, in Leviticus, and all other books in the Old Testament specifically mention the prohibition of interest by a brother to a brother. And as a result of that, why should somebody who actually believed in Leviticus also follow into interest, for instance? And of course, with respect to other prohibition, such as prohibition of alcohol, why should a religion be promoting the alcoholism or something that is actually harmful to the society? Likewise, if you look at the non-interest finance that are also running away from anything to do with pornography, why should a religion promote pornography? Christianity, Judaism will not actually dare to promote pornography. And as a result of that, all these don'ts that we have in Islamic banking and finance that we are saying are equally don'ts when it comes to other religions. So it is only knowledge sharing during the conferences, engaging in this kind of conversation with the stakeholders in the non-Muslim communities, for instance, that you can let them understand that what non-interest finance is saying they are not going to do, the Christians also supposed to do the same, because it is also embedded in their own respective Old Testament and New Testament. So by creating this synergy in terms of creating awareness and coming together and be discussing on this particular issue, it will solve a lot of issues. When it comes to investors in Jaiz Bank, for instance, those that have collected financing, you realize that there are many non-Muslim actually that have collected financing in Jaiz Bank. There are many non-Muslim that are working in Jaiz Bank, in Taj Bank, and some other Islamic bank in Nigeria. In my organization, which is 117 Capital, we equally have non-Muslim that are equally working with us. When it comes to actually providing our services, whoever comes to us will analyze it. If he fits into the requirements, we will provide the financing to him in line with what we have in the corporate policy that we have. So actually, is to create awareness and to engage the other party and to see what you can do. Inshallah, Rabbi, everybody will come on board and invest in this particular mode of financing that we have as Islamic banking and finance or non-interest banking and finance. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you so much.
Mashallah. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much for the question. And Uthman Mohammed, you can unmute yourself and then ask your question. Uthman Mohammed. In the meantime, Sheikh, please, someone is asking available. Uthman, before you come in, a moment. Malam Atari, please, someone is asking if the slides can be made available so that they can reference, inshallah.
Well, actually, that is actually the prerogative of Ifrig, which is already under the Ifrig custody at the moment.
Very well. Brother, thank you so much.
Handle that aspect.
Well noted, well. Inshallah. We will share it after this program, inshallah.
Okay. So you can get in touch, inshallah, through our email or contact numbers, inshallah. And then we'll share the slides. Brother Uthman Mohammed, kindly proceed.
Naam, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Alhamdulillah. Thank you to Ifrig for organizing this platform, a very educative platform, and thank you, Sheikh Attahiru, for this presentation. Alhamdulillah, I think Islamic banking and finance being implemented or framework being drawn for Ghana will go a long way to help, especially Muslims here in Ghana. In my locality, I know a couple of businessmen and individuals who have challenge with the conventional bank. As a result of this, they are not saving in the bank. And so the idea of having an ethical platform of perhaps saving and investment is a welcoming news to this group of individuals. I say this because we wanted to roll out a business model that will bring the entrepreneur and the investor together, whereby the investor will link directly to the entrepreneur, and we will be like the middleman in between them to draft the contract and everything. And so during the feasibility study of this project, we came into contact with this group of individuals who were willing and ready to invest in an ethical environment. So this program or this framework, if implemented, will really help a lot of people who are at the moment not known. But my question is that, speaking from the experience I just shared, how can we, even though we might not necessarily be a financial institution, how do we fall, or how do we go through the certification and the regulatory procedures in order for us to have this project implemented? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Brother Uthman Mohammed. Now, with respect to that, you may have at least two options. One is to go the route of cooperative, so that you can establish the cooperative, and in that cooperative, you put the standard procedure manual. What do you intend to do? What do you intend to achieve? How are you going to invest the funds of the participant that you are going to collect their money to do? Ghana must have their own respective procedures, how they can register and recognize cooperative, I believe. The second option is through the route of Securities and Exchange Commission, where SEC usually gives license to fund managers, and you get a fund manager who is going to domesticate that particular unit of funds and get license of that particular funds from the Securities and Exchange Commission, and then deploy the funds in line with what you want with respect to all that aspect. So these are the two ways I think you can easily do that in order to manage the regulatory as well as the listing requirement with respect to all that aspect. Thank you so much, Brother Uthman Mohammed, once again.
MashaAllah. Someone is also, thank you so much for the question and then the answer as well. Someone is asking about the recording. Inshallah, you can check our Facebook page, inshallah, for the recording, inshallah. Could you kindly upload on your site or Google Drive location? Yeah, so inshallah, when you check our Facebook, inshallah, you find the recording there, and even previous submissions from Sheikh Atairu and the others as well. Okay, so I think that there's someone is also saying the Bible has 17 references on the abhorrence of usury or interest or conventional interest in financial transactions. So I think that goes to buttress yes, the issue raised by Ajia Adisha about the advocacy for Christians to also understand, or non-Muslims generally, to understand Islamic finance is not just for Muslims, but it is for everybody, especially those interested in ethical financing. And all of us are indeed interested in ethical, socially responsible financing. So that is for us to also learn. That is, I think, the point of information for us all to learn. Okay, so if you have any question, you can raise your hands. We are wrapping up so that Mala Tairu can give his final words. And then
Sheriff, I think there are 3 people's hands up. I think 4 now. We have Abdul Samad, Kasim Siaka, Alpha, and iPhone. So maybe if you can give them the opportunity.
Okay, so let's start with, yes, Ibrahim Abdul Samad. Yeah, I was checking the chat, so I missed the.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So I'm Ibrahim Abdul Samad from Ghana. First, we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for making this webinar possible. And then also commend Ifrig for their efforts. In fact, and our presenter, I think I've met him personally in Accra on 2 different occasions that were conferences organized by Ifrig. So may Allah reward him abundantly for his efforts. My question is directed to our presenter, and I know there are other experts in the webinar. They can equally share their thoughts on that. And specifically, that is the Specialized Deposit Taking Act. I mean, the Banking Act 2016-930, specifically Section 18(1)R. That is about non-interest banking in the Ghana Banking Act. I know our presenter, I've ever heard about him, his opinion on that. But I'm just putting the question forward because last time we carried research to know the opinions of scholars concerning that particular specific aspect of the Banking Act, whether it is really given the go-ahead of implementing Islamic banking in Ghana or not. We generally found that majority of the scholars were neutral as to whether it is given the go-ahead for the implementation of Islamic banking in Ghana or not. So now I want to also put it before this particular platform to hear views and possible, if it is not directly related to Islamic banking, but what could be other non-interest banking activities that it is referring to. I think this is basically my question. Jazakumullahu khairan. Thank you so much for your time.
Afwan, please, could you clarify what neutral means? Sorry to butt in, I'm very sorry. I really wanted to get a better answer. What do the scholars mean by neutral? They don't care or they don't know or what? Like, what is the meaning of neutral about?
Yes, we interpreted it. The understanding is that they can't tell whether it is given the go-ahead for the implementation of Islamic banking in Ghana or not. Though some scholars were just in agreement that it is, some few agreed that yes, that is Islamic banking and finance is included, and others were also responded negatively. But these people were undecided. So that's the meaning of the neutral. They were undecided as to whether
the context. Okay.
It can be understood. Yes, you see that. Yeah. I don't know whether it's clear now.
Okay, check. It's clear.
Thank you so much, Brother Ibrahim. Now, to mention to you the Banking and Other Deposit Taking Institutions Act of Ghana, and the reference you gave specifically said the non-interest banking is included in what actually was accepted as the permissible activities that a bank can do in Ghana. Now that actually has crossed the first most important basic hurdles that must be recognized by the Act. If this mentioning in this particular section 8, 1R is not there, meaning whatever we are doing here, the Act must be taken to the legislators for them to actually give their consent and said yes for Islamic banking and finance. But by mentioning it in the Act itself, it has already legal backing that now it is only the Bank of Ghana that can provide other regulatory framework to provide how is this bank going to operate. Like I explained to you, in Nigeria, we equally have Bank and Other Financial Institutions Act, which also give actually power, which also recognize the profit and loss sharing bank to be provided license. And by mere doing that, the Central Bank of Nigeria decided to go and change the models by including in their model the specialized banking called Islamic Bank and Finance. So even in Ghana, because it has already been mentioned there, it is now left to the Bank of Ghana to come up with the change of model, which that particular act has already given that power to the Bank of Ghana to do. Whenever there is any need for the policy or for some things to be adjusted, they can actually do that, or some requirements or regulations to be provided, they can provide that. So now that we already have it recognized, meaning what are missing is how can this particular non-interest bank play in this particular environment where we have a lot of interest-based activities? Is it going to be a new company must be incorporated to make sure that whatever they've collected is Sharia compliant and they are going to deal with it in Sharia compliant activities? Is it actually they are going to have the governance structures where there must be a Sharia advisors that are going to be advising their activities to make sure that they comply with every angle of Sharia activities? If that is the case, meaning there is need for a special document that is called guidelines or framework, regulatory framework that must be provided by the Bank of Ghana. And that is what I recommended, that particular framework must be provided. In that particular framework, then Bank of Ghana can provide all these particular activities. Is it going to be a standalone bank? Is it going to be a conventional bank with a window? If that window is going to come, how is the window going to make sure they ring fence whatever deposit they are going to collect? How are they going to make sure that the deposit they collected, they invested it in Sharia compliant? How are they going to provide the governance structure of Sharia unit in the bank, as well as to make sure that they have Sharia advisory council of experts that are going to be advising them? These are all the frameworks that I meant we have to provide by Bank of Ghana. And as a result of that, the utterances or the statement that the Act itself says it allows this particular non-interest bank to be provided is not adequate enough. There must be a complete framework to be provided for it to actually thrive. And I gave you example of Habib Bank in Nigeria, where as a result of lack of this particular framework, it was not able to succeed, and therefore it has to fold. Similar to what will happen in Ghana if this framework is not going to be provided. So framework is going to take care of that aspect, as you mentioned. Thank you so much, Brother Ibrahim.
MashaAllah. Thank you so much for the question and then the answer. Jazakumullah khair. Brother Kasim Siaka, kindly unmute yourself and then ask your question. After that, Brother Zik, inshallah, and then Swala, and then Alpha.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. My first question is that who are the target population, the target audience? Is it our market women? Is it which class of society are you going to target? That's my first question. And we have the intention, if or when the regulations or the whole thing is accepted by Bank of Ghana, you bring out the allocations. Do you have any intention of setting up satellite, or regular basis where it will only be the usual thing peacefully in Accra, and the citizens of Accra are only those who are enjoying from the services of this Islamic banking? So my questions are two. First, which class of society are we targeting? And secondly, how is the administration going to be done? Is it going to be centralized or decentralized? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Brother Kasim Siaka. Now, when it comes to target audience, it depends on the strategy of the bank. The bank that is going to be licensed, does it want to go to retail investors? If they want to go to retail investors, their marketing activities must actually tilt towards the retail activities. Or do they want to go to institutional investors? There are institutional investors such as the pension industry, some that may want actually their pension to be invested in Sharia compliant. They can also fall into the insurance, the institutional provided. The takaful is an institutional investor, therefore they actually fall under the institutional, not retail. But it depends on the bank strategy. What do they want to actually get? That is what will make them to understand where they are. With respect to the location, in the framework that will be provided by Bank of Ghana, they may decide to classify the different categories of licensing. In Nigeria, for instance, we have at least two categories. One is a regional license, which means a bank can have a license to operate within two regions in the country only, meaning not the entire 6 regions, since we have 6 regions in Nigeria, or another license that can be for the entire country. Now, Bank of Ghana may decide to say we are going to also categorize our licensing to make sure that we put it into this particular different region or different licensing. It depends on the framework that the Bank of Ghana is going to provide to make sure whether the location is going to be concentrated in Accra or in the rural area or diverse in all the country. It depends on the licensing or actually the framework that the Bank of Ghana is going to provide. I hope this has explained some of your concern there. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm most grateful. Thank you very much.
Sharif.
Sorry. Thank you so much for the question and answer. I think Zico has tripped off. So Swala, you can unmute yourself and ask your question, inshallah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharif, and a very wonderful presentation to the speaker. This is like my second time following up, and I'm much impressed with the information you're giving us. And a very big thumbs up to Ifrig for consistently working on this and then pushing this agenda. So I'm looking at this from a business point of view, where definitely the conventional banks that we have currently, having seen something like this, will automatically engage in corporate politics by trying to shoot it down, because the possibility of having the masses to follow it as time goes on is extremely high. So, in quick terms, which means that we need to have a lot of forces on the ground. We need to have a national agenda, because I focus on going left, right, and center, or on various platforms to get the people on the ground. In three sentences or in three points, how can an investor make profits when they invest in Islamic banking, or should I say non-investment, basically? So that should we meet someone who does not want to have all the necessary talks, and that they just want to understand some of these things? What are we supposed to tell them? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Now, Malan,
Zico. Thank you so much for that question. Now, what I can say is that, as you know, the Islamic banking and finance, they have different mode of financing, where an investor who invested either as a shareholder or as a depositor in Baraba account called investment account, that one, it has actually way how they are using the funds in order to finance some other projects and get return. Now, the one of the contracts is joint venture. They call it musharaka or mudaraba, where the bank is going to provide the funding and the customer will manage that particular. While the bank will actually go and finance the customer, and the customer will go and utilize the fund, and then whatever the profit they get, they will come actually and share with the bank. That is the profit portion that will be shared between the bank and the investor, either shareholder or the investor in the investment account called Mudaraba account. That is one. There is also a lease contract where they buy asset and they lease it to the customer, such as house or car. And in that particular rental they will be collecting, it has profit leg of profit portion in that particular rental that they will be collecting on a monthly basis. Therefore, they can have their return in that particular payment by the lessee. There is also a sales contract where they go to the market and buy a car and they come out and they sell that car to the customer who wants it at a cost plus the profit markup, and they make the payment to be instrumental for a period of time because it already has cost plus the profit markup, minimum profit is already there. So these are all part of the ways the Islamic banks actually makes their money, and as a result of that, whatever they make, they also pay it to either the deposit investors or the shareholders that have invested in the banking sector.
Thank you so very much. Thank you.
To tell you specifically, we have a bank here in Nigeria called Taj Bank that have already, when they opened for operations, within 9 months, they were able to actually clear all their costs and also start making profit in the first nine months of their existence. That's what I can say. Abu Hassana.
إذا أردت شخصا محيي اسمه
All right. Thank you so much, Sheikh. Thank you for the question and then for the answer. Umar Farouk Yusuf, you can kindly unmute yourself and ask your question. Then Alpha can also come in afterwards.
All right. Thank you so much. And I would like to thank the organizers for this opportunity and also the resource person. My question is regarding the government. If Islamic Development Bank, for example, is instituted in the country, what is there for the government to make in terms of benefits? What would the government benefit in the institution or in the creation of this institution? Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Brother Omar, your questions may have two wings. One, in your explanation, you said Islamic Development Bank. And I know that I mentioned Ghana to be a member of Islamic Development Bank. If that is what you mean, what will be if they become the member? What benefit are they going to get? One, Islamic Development Bank heavily invested in infrastructures in member countries. So if there is any gap, there is need for financing of infrastructure by the Ghana government of Ghana, for instance, they can apply to Islamic Development Bank and they can bring a couple of millions of dollars in order to finance it in infrastructure development in Ghana. Secondly, because being a member of Islamic Development Bank, the regulators such as the Bank of Ghana, Securities and Exchange Commission, they can request the Islamic Development Bank to also provide the capacity building program where they will be learning from this particular Islamic Development Bank aspect. These are all part of the benefit that the government can get. Secondly, if you are referring to establishing the private banks that are Islamic banks in Ghana, is what you are referring to. The banks as we have, they are private organizations. But licensed by the Bank of in order actually to provide services to the public. And as a result of them being in existence, they provided financing, which actually by extension it will have multiplier effect that will go to government in form of either can get, and also being a bank that will provide profit, the bank can also give tax to the government and some other aspect in line with all that aspect. So these are the two segments, either Islamic Development Bank that is based in Jeddah, that is what you are referring to, or establishing new Islamic banks here in Accra and in Kumasi and some other, that is what you mean. I all gave you the response that I can believe I have as much as possible. Thank you so much for that question, Umar Farouk Yusuf.
MashaAllah, thank you so much. Alpha, you can unmute yourself and then ask your question. I think so. Your hands still up, but I guess you have asked the question, right?
Okay. Jazakallah khair for the presentation. I wanted to know.
I've not, inshallah. Maybe when it's done.
All right. Alpha, please proceed.
I wanted to ask about the importance of having an indigenous Islamic bank, starting out immediately. Maybe the licenses are given, but I'm also looking at I'm exploring the aspect of for instance, Jai and Taj Bank coming into the Ghana market. And how easy will it be for them to come in directly, or is it the case that they'll have to come in with products? But my main question is about the importance of having an indigenous bank, a Ghanaian bank to start with. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alpha. Now, whatever we are discussing here so far, we are referring to having indigenous bank to spring off in Ghana. Yes, in Nigeria, we started with Jaiz Bank, which is an indigenous bank. Then we equally have the Taj Bank, the Lotus Bank. They are all local banks that we have in Nigeria. Because of the regulations in Nigeria, it may not be immediately possible for them to jump from Nigeria to come and have another branch or another entity in Accra, in Ghana, for instance, in order to establish an outlet there. It may not be immediately possible, but it's possible in the future. However, the webinar here we have today is to see how we can ginger the investors, the entrepreneur in Ghana, how can they come together to form a company that will apply for a license of Islamic bank in Ghana. Let it start from there. And I think that is the focus we have at the moment to see how we can get the indigenous bank in Ghana. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much for the question and answer. Brother Twala, you can come in now.
Assalamu alaikum. So basically my question, well, they are in two folds. The first one, I guess has touched on it, which has to do with whether the Islamic bank so to be established should be under the traditional banks, as in the conventional banks, as in having desks within the conventional banks, or standalone. And it's something that we need to get it right at the onset. My main question, because that has been discussed, is whether there are prerequisites. For instance, when you look at Ghana, it's among the top African countries that are highly they are high on inflation, basically, and whether it's a prerequisite for us to meet certain stability before we can meet the requirements. I'm looking at time value of money. When we consider the current inflation, how an investor will be willing to invest in X amount, and over a year still expect X amount, which largely is the understanding when it comes to, provided there is no profit when it comes to Islamic banking. So I want to know, beside the policy frameworks and what Bank of Ghana has to do, what other institutions or regulators have to do, what must the country in itself meet? Is there any prerequisite as far as inflation is concerned and other related monetary issues? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Salah, for your question. It's actually, when it comes to either inflation or foreign exchange fluctuations in the country, it's left to the investor to analyze his investment decision and to see whether he is going to invest. his investment is usually for long term, not actually within a year. So by next year, it is expected that things are going to be much better, God willing, inshallah. In Nigeria, for instance, our inflation rate is higher than the Ghana. The exchange rate that we have is higher than the Ghana, but yet we do have investors that are providing their money in licensing new firms, new banks that they have filed their application with the Central Bank of Nigeria, with the Securities and Exchange Commission to get licensed as a fund manager, or with the National Insurance Commission to get licensed as a takaful operators. We still have a lot of application that is going into this particular regulatory authorities. So it's left to actually the investor who is going to decide what is he going to do with his investment at the moment. The investment shouldn't be actually, like I said, short term. It is usually, if it is equity investment, it's usually a long term that you have. You don't expect actually to get your return within a year, within 2 years, unless if actually that bank is so aggressive, like what I mentioned, Taj Bank got their expenses to be cleared within 9 months, and they started to be in profit by the 10th month, and they closed the year with a profit after they open for that. Apart from that, actually, if you put your investment as an equity investor, you should assume at least 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the line before you start getting the dividend. But at least whenever you said, I want to sell my shares, that particular shares must have a capital appreciation. It cannot be sold at a nominal price that you bought it when it was just about to start. That is another angle you can look at it, inshallah Rabbi. Thank you so much, Sola, for that particular question you asked.
Brother Yusuf, can you come in?
Yes, thank you very much. I like you for a wonderful presentation as always. We pray that Allah will bless you and your family and everything that you do. Alhamdulillah. My question has to do with finance professionals. Alhamdulillah, now that the announcement has been made by the president, as professionals, what are some of the advices that you give us? What advice you give us in terms of our preparation? Because the Islamic finance industry is the new industry. You have accountants, lawyers, you also have insurers and other professionals in space. Is there something like a bridge course that professionals can take, sort of update themselves in this upcoming industry? Thank you very much.
Sorry, Brother Yusuf, I don't understand your question. If you can make it so clear, please.
Yes, I mean, so now that we have Islamic finance coming up in Ghana.
Yes.
You see professionals in the, let's say, finance, law, marketing, and other places. Is there a course that professionals can sort of take to update their knowledge to bring themselves up to scratch with Islamic finance? I'm actually asking this question because as one of my presentations that I make with Muslim Association of General Accountants, I told them that for Islamic finance as accountants, it's not just a spiritual issue, it's also a professional issue. So now that we are going to have Islamic finance in Ghana, this is the time for them to also upgrade their knowledge with Islamic finance. Because I know, for instance, ACCA have Islamic finance as part of the staff, but we have a lot of accountants who are qualified today that they don't even know anything about Islamic finance. But ACCA and I think ICA, that is the Chartered Institute of Accountants in Ghana, have now updated their syllabus to accommodate Islamic finance.
Well, I understand, Brother Yusuf, what you are saying, and it's part of my suggestion as probably last point that I mentioned there, that there is need for government to support universities, colleges, and non-governmental organizations that are providing educational knowledge on this particular aspect of mode of financing. Of course, Not only that, even lawyers, they're supposed to know the non-interest banking and finance, because non-interest banking and finance is all about the contracts. If you don't have lawyers that can provide the contracts, it's an issue actually that will come up. If you don't have accountants that know how to provide the accounting entries of non-interest banking and finance, it is an issue that are there. If you don't have professionals that can structure the sukuk and structure some other innovative products, is also another issue to do with that. So there is need for universities to provide the courses when it comes to Islamic banking and finance, Islamic capital market, and Islamic asset management activities, as well as Islamic insurance activities. That is the insurance aspect that I mentioned. So these are all things that are needed in order to make sure that the industry is sustained, because it has to be continuous. As long as creating this particular knowledge is very necessary. Likewise, like I mentioned in my presentation, that there are scholars in Ghana. But of course, some of our scholars, they know fiqh and they know some other issues to do with that fiqh activities. But they may not know actually economics. They don't know commerce in a formal way. They don't know the banking operations in a formal way. So it is only these universities, it is only these colleges, it is only these organizations like Ifrig that can provide this kind of knowledge and close the gap to these particular scholars that we have, but they don't know actually the conventional economics and conventional asset management activities and conventional stocks exchange activities that they need to understand, they need to know. So definitely there is need for government to support this particular institution. From my own expectation is that that particular task force, that particular special committee that I mentioned to be provided, they're supposed to understand there is this particular gap and advise government what to do when it comes to this. All their holistic roadmap and report they are going to give to the government is very important actually to have this kind of sustainable mode of maintaining the knowledge of Islamic banking and finance in Ghana. Thank you so much once again, Brother Yusuf, for bringing that aspect. Ifrig can play a major role in that closing the gap, inshallah Rabbi. Thank you.
Thank you very so much, Sheikh. Jazakumullah khair. Brings us to the end of today's session.
Nam Sharif, are you there? Can you check your mic?
Sure, I can hear you, but I can't hear Sharif.
Yeah, okay. I think he has stripped off. Sharif, are you back?
Yes, I'm back.
Okay.
I think this brings us to the end of today's session. Sheikh, please, if you have a final words, inshallah, we'll be grateful. So we do the closing prayer.
Of course, my final words, I've already mentioned it earlier. We are only creating awareness here. And we are trying to see how the government, regulatory authorities can provide the regulatory framework. But that is not enough. A private sector must also beat their chest and said, yes, I'm ready to file my application with the Bank of Ghana, with the Securities and Exchange Commission, with the National Insurance Commission, to see what institutions we can actually establish in order to start servicing that particular segment of the people that are interested in this particular mode of financing. So we need investors, both locally and internationally, that can put their hand together to incorporate these particular organizations that can apply for the licenses in these particular subsectors of the finance that are needing this particular service, inshallah Rabbi. And of course, even though there are a lot of things that I put in my presentation, but should not be actually a kind of all in, it is just a guide that I believe can be extended, can be expanded by either Ifrig or by some others that are interested in developing the necessary papers to see what we can do with respect to this particular industry in Ghana. So inshallah Rabbi, I'm always available by Ifrig for whatever contribution I can give to this particular industry as usual. Thank you so much, Brother Sharif, Brother Shoaib, and all other stakeholders here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. And we thank everybody for making time to join us on this call. Hopefully, next webinar, we'll broadcast it, and we hope to see you as well. Thank you so much, everybody. God bless you all.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
We are grateful for
Warahmatullahi
wonderful
wabarakatuh.
program.
Peace be upon
Thank
you
you
all.
very much.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa
Assalamu
barakatuh.
alaikum. We are grateful
Wa
to you
alaikum
all.
assalam. Wa alaikum assalam.
Now.
Yeah, so